my name is Amanda Chafin, and I work at the Lane Community Technology Center in Hamilton, Ohio. 3D printing is just one of the services that we offer here. In a previous video, I showed you how to download and 3D print an object from a free repository. But what if you want to design your own object from scratch? Or what if you found an object that you want to print, but you want to customize it first? That's what we're going to do today. For beginners, I recommend a free Basic Computer-Aided Design, or CAD, software called TinkerCAD. It lets you drag, drop, and manipulate basic shapes in order to build 3D objects. It's a web app, so you'll need a persistent internet connection. You'll also need a TinkerCAD account. Today, I want to build a custom trophy for an upcoming library program. The program is about video creation, so I want to create a trophy that is reminiscent of an Oscar. I'm going to walk you through the process and show you some TinkerCAD tips and tricks along the way. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to open up your web browser. I use Chrome, you can use whatever you'd like. Go to the address bar, type in tinkercad.com. Those of you who already have an account, you're going to just hit sign in. Those of you who do not, you're going to join now to create your account. Everyone's creation experience is going to be a little different depending on what options they choose, but bear in mind that children may need adult permission to use the software, so it's important to know your parents' or guardian's email address and to let them know to expect that email. Everyone's going to need basic information like your own email address to start an account, so make sure you have that information, you know your password ready. Also, if you're using an EDU account, especially if you're K through 12, those often have restrictions on them, so try not to use one of those. Once you create your account, the website is going to open up and it's going to look something like this. Now, obviously, if you're a new account, you're not going to have a gallery of old projects like I do. What you will have, and this is my first tip here, you'll have lessons. These tutorials are very handy. I highly recommend that you go through them. You can see here that 3 years ago, this is where I got my start. I just made a keychain, and now I can teach you how to make things in TinkerCAD. My next tip is don't reinvent the wheel. Up here in the top right hand corner, TinkerCAD hosts a repository of other people's files. That's called the gallery. That's right there. And you can search this. So if you hit this magnifying glass here, you can type just Oscar if you want to and scroll through. But this one's, the one I found is kind of buried. So I'm going to search people instead because I already found it and I know who created it. So I'm going to type in the creator's name. That is Nico9297. And I'm just going to hit enter there. And you see it pulls up his account. Alright, and there's the Oscar that I want to use. I'm going to click it, and then I'm going to choose copy and tinker, okay? Now, this could take a little while, so just go ahead and let it take its time. This brings us to our next tip, which is always check the license. You want to make sure that you check the license requirements for every file that you end up using. You don't want to accidentally claim credit for someone else's work or use it in a way that violates someone else's copyright. That's what these little symbols right here are. So if you click on them, it's going to take you to the Creative Commons website, and that's going to show you that this is an attribution and share alike license, and it's going to explain to you what that means. So you're allowed to share it, you're also allowed to copy it, redistribute it, you're allowed to change it, transform it, mix it up, even commercially, that's crucial. And in exchange, you just have to give appropriate credit. So we've already done that. We've already told you that Nico9297 was the creator here. We're also going to include the creator's name in our end credits for the video and in our description. But I just want to make sure that you know that's part of the deal here. We have to properly attribute the design to the creator. And the other part of the deal here is to share alike. If we're going to redistribute this file, that means that we have to redistribute it under the same exact license. Whenever you're out there on the internet and you want to use someone else's work and you want to build off of it, look for the license and figure out what you're allowed to do, because you don't want to accidentally steal someone else's work. Now that we know that we're allowed to use the file and we've attributed it to the creator, go to TinkerCAD and click Copy and Tinker. This is going to open up Nico9297's Oscar trophy. Big or complex files like this one can take a long time to open, so be patient. If it really takes a long time, try refreshing your dashboard and tinkering your file from there. So to do that, in TinkerCAD, you're just going to click this TinkerCAD logo. Wherever you are in TinkerCAD, that's going to take you back to your dashboard, okay? And you can see our file is right here. You just click Tinker this, it'll take you right back in. If it's taking too long, that's a little bit of a workaround. That brings us to our next tip, which is to fix the grid. I'm an American, which means that I think in inches. So one tip is that you can change your measurements to the imperial system by clicking Edit Grid. It's right here in the lower corner. It's right there. So if I click that, I can just change it from millimeters to inches right there, and I can update the grid. Now all your measurements are going to be given in inches, and that's really handy if you are an American like me. Now that we have Oscar imported and we have our grid edited to be in inches, what we're going to do is we're going to create a film reel look on this base. So just to show you what I'm getting at here, see how in the real Oscar it looks like it's a film reel because it has these indentations? We're going to try to mimic that. We're actually going to do a couple of tips when we do that. So the first thing, we're going to ungroup Oscar. I'm going to move him out of the way. Now we have our base. And let's just make our base here a little bigger. About 2 inches by about 2 inches. The first method is duplication, and the next method is circular array. Let's start with duplication. So normally, if you want to duplicate something, you're just going to grab the cylinder here. This is a hole, so what that means is it's actually negative space instead of solid space. And you can usually toggle between these two functions. When you have something that's a hole, if you group it with another object, it cuts through it, so you get that little donut effect, right? That is kind of what we're going for. We're going to take one of these cylinders here and we're going to duplicate it. Now normally you could duplicate it with this little button here. Just click it, duplicate it. Another way to do it is click it and Control D, duplicate it. But there's a third way. It's called quick duplicate. Hold down your Alt key, pull it off the side here, do it again and again as many times as you want. So you can kind of see we're getting that film reel look, but it's not even. So what are we going to do? That brings us to another tip, which is aligning to reference. Let me show you, normally when you want to align, let's say you want to align this box and this cylinder. What you do, you select them both, you hit your alignment key here, and you align them along these different nodes. But you see how it moved both objects? You don't always want to move both objects. So you would align to reference. So let's try that again. You pull your box over here and your cylinder over here, and you're like, I just want to align my cylinder to my box instead of moving them both. So you select them both, hit your alignment button here, and now you select the box. Now you see how the nodes are just here on the box, but they're both selected. That means this box is your reference. Now when you align them, the cylinder moves, but the box stays put. So we are actually going to use that tip here for making our film reel. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select all the center here, and I'm going to hit my alignment key, choose my center one, and I'm going to line them all up. And I'm going to repeat that. Okay, so for this cross section, I'm going to select all of these, hit my alignment tool, choose my reference, and line them all up. All right, much smoother, right? Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to delete the center. We're going to group all these here. Going to pull it over to our base. Hold down Control and Shift. Take a corner and just move it inward. What we're looking for is we want to size it so that it'll fit on the plate. Once we have that, we're going to select it. Now we're just going to regular old align it. Make sure that it doesn't cut into the bottom. Just pull the arrow up. There you go. We just want a little indentation. Now we group. Ta-da! Film reel. Looks great, right? There's actually another method to achieve a similar result, and this is called a circular array. In TinkerCAD, you are not limited just to these basic shapes. You have other shapes that you can choose from. So what we're going to do, we're going to make this plate here about 2 by 2, just like we did before. And instead of going for a cylinder hole under basic shapes, we are going to look for a circular array under shape generators. So I'm going to hit all here under shape generators. And as I recall, it was there we go. So there's circular array. So we're going to pull it over here. You're going to say, hey Amanda, that doesn't look like a film reel. That's okay. We can change it. See where it says object here? Let's turn it into a circle. Number of copies? Well, we want 5. Why do we want 5? We look at Oscar here. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, they're kind of far apart and they're kind of small. We can change that. Let's change the size, make it a little bigger, and change the radius. So size, radius, and let's size it so they're not quite touching. There we go. That looks pretty nice, right? So now when we pull it over here, use our shift control and make it just a little smaller so it'll fit on this plate. A little smaller. And now we're just going to align it. So let's actually align to reference. So we have both of these selected. We're going to align. Now we're going to select our plate and let's align this along both axes. And now we're going to make sure it's not poking through the bottom. Change it to a hole and group it. There you go, film reel. If you're enjoying this video, now's a good time to pause to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, or share this video with your friends on Facebook or other social media accounts. It really helps us to get the word out there about all the cool things that the library has to offer, and we'd really appreciate it. Now it's time to create the base. That is this little black part here. And you can see you kind of want it to be a little inverted. You want it to be a little bigger at the top than it is at the bottom. So you want it to taper. What we're going to do, we're actually going to use a cone. So we're going to pull a cone over here, and we're going to change some of our settings here. We're going to change this to be about 2.3 inches. And then the height, we're going to go with 1.75. That way it's going to be just under 2. And now we can change some of these values. First thing we're going to do, we're going to change our top radius here, because we want that to be a little larger. So it's going to be 1.15. Now we're going to change our base radius to just about 1. Now we're going to set the side slider all the way up to 64. That way it's a little more smooth. We're going to change this back down to 2.3 and 2.3. Now we have a nice little tapered base. So now it's time for our next tip to use the work plane. We're just going to grab the work plane right over here to the top here of our tapered cone. We're going to grab our ring shape. Now the ring shape is kind of neat. So let's grab the ring shape and just boop, move it there right on top. That way now we know that these two sides are going to line up. We can move our work plane back now. Now we're going to size our ring shape because again what we're trying to do, we're trying to make this little decorative lip here, okay? So we're going to resize this. Let's try 2.5 inches in either direction. Let's line these guys up. Now this brings us to our next tip, which is extrusion. The ring shape, the reason it's kind of unique is it gives you this extrusion menu. What you can do is if you pull on these little nodes, you'll see it will have an effect on our shape. So I can make the lip a little bigger there. All kinds of different ways that I can manipulate it. We want to make a little decorative lip here, and I think I actually want to not make it stand out quite so much. And all you gotta do is just play with it a little bit. That's definitely a decorative lip. Let's compare it to that. Looks like it's sort of inverted actually. That's easy enough to change. We're just gonna get it down to 180. We have a nice little lip here to give it some flair. So that's our tip about the ring tool, is you actually have this menu here and you can manipulate this all kinds of different ways. It's just a lot of trial and error until you get the shape that you want. And we can just fill in that spot there. If we go to basic shapes here, we can fill this in with a cylinder. So let's put the work plane here. Let's drag a cylinder there. Move our work plane again. Ramp up those sides. Shift Control, make this bigger. Kind of where we want it. Fill that. Let's line all three of these up. Move this down. And now when we group this, we have a pretty nice shape for our base with a little lip there. And just so it's easier for us to see, we're going to change that to black. Okay, so now that you've used your ring tool here to create a nice decorative lip at the top of your base, we need to fill out the bottom of the base. So we're going to take a cylinder and we're going to resize it here about, let's do this about 3.25. We're going to do that on either side here. And now let's actually shorten this up. We don't want it to be too tall, so let's change that to 0.125. One thing that we're going to do with this shape is we're going to give it a bevel. So we're going to change our bevel here to 0.72. And you're going to see that's going to give it a nice little decorative touch around the edge. And our last step here is to even out our edges just by moving the sides up to 64. So now that's smoothed it out quite a bit. Good. Now we have our base. We are just going to align both these parts of our base. What we can do here is we can actually create a work plane, pull our work plane down, and now if we start to move this down, we can just change right here to 0, and now this is sitting pretty right on top of that base. And we can add these together by grouping them, and now you can see we have one nice piece here for our base. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make sure the top of this base is perfectly shaped to fit Oscar in it. So to do that, we're going to duplicate Oscar. We're going to move him to the top here. Move our work plane to the top. Let's pull him up to that level. And we can change our work plane. Now let's center these up. Just use our alignment tool. Alright, and now what we're going to do, go down here to Edit Grid. We're going to snap it here at about 132. And we're going to pull this down just a bit. Now we're going to turn Oscar into a hole. Select and group. And now, if we zoom in here, you can see that Oscar is going to fit perfectly right here in this base. Okay, so now it is time to make the little nameplate. And what I mean by that is if you look at our regular Oscar statue, see how the award name is given right here? So it's going to be a little tricky, so bear with me, but we're going to make this happen. It's going to look really cool. So to do that, we're going to have to duplicate our base, because we're going to be using some aspects of this base. And we're actually going to duplicate it again. And now let's ungroup this one, because we want this by itself. Now we can get rid of these. And on this one, we're going to ungroup. We don't need Oscar. We do need this part to be a hole. You know what? I don't need that one. And this one, let's just change so that we can see this is going to be the gold part that we're working on. Let's just make this a little bigger so that it cuts all the way through, okay? We want our hole to cut all the way through. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make another hole. We're going to take a box. And we're just going to eyeball it here. We're going to also make it cut all the way through. And we're going to pull it out here so that what we have is a little bit of that curvature left. So we want that. So now when we group all these, we should have a nice curve there, but it's still a little bigger than what we want, right? So what we're going to do, we're just going to take a little box here, and we're going to center a line. Remember, quick duplicate, so you hold down Alt and pull it off to the side. We're just going to quick duplicate. We can eyeball this a little, it's not super important, but if you wanted to do a work plane, you totally could. We're just going to take away our 1 inch there. We're going to take both of these, we're going to sink them a little bit, turn them into holes. Now group. So now we have a little nameplate that's going to fit right here very nicely. And this brings us to our next tip. What you can do is you can actually import. So if you look at the text tool in TinkerCAD, it's really limited. It looks very samey. And if you have a different logo or something that you want to work with, that may not be the best. So what you're going to do is we can import. I'm going to choose a file. We go here to downloads, and I'm going to import an SVG file here of my library's logo. And I'm just going to do art on that. So it's just going to be our logo. I'm going to import it. It's going to be big. That's fine. Remember, hold down Shift Control, and we can resize it. So it's going to fit nicely. So let's throw a work plane here. Stick that on the top. Align these. I'm actually going to duplicate that for a little later. What we're going to do is we are going to turn our logo here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn it into a hole. So we're going to sink it. Turn it into a hole and group. So now that gives you that nice engraved look, see? And we're also going to make a little space where this will sit on our base. So to do that, we're just going to line this up. Let's actually stick our work plane right there. Line that up. And now let's line it that way. It's going to go right against it. And we're going to center a line. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sink it just a little bit in. We're going to make it a hole. We're going to pull this up to the top there. And remember one of our tips from earlier, how we can actually align to a reference. So when we click that, that becomes our reference. And we can just line it up right there in the top. So now all we have to do is we click our little hole and we click on our base. And we group it. That's going to give us a little indentation there. And this is going to fit perfectly in that little indentation. So that's going to give us a little place for that to sit. when we're gluing it, and it's going to fit like a glove. Okay, and now all that's left to do is to print. You're going to print these two with our gold color. You're going to print this with our black color. And then you're going to glue Oscar into the hole we made for him in the base. And you're going to glue this into the hole we made for it in the base. And then you're done. So good job, everybody. I hope you learned some great tips and tricks along the way and the things that you can add to your next print. The Lane Community Technology Center is part of the Lane Libraries in Butler County, Ohio. You can call us at 513-785-2727, email us at techcenter@lanepl.org, or visit our website at lanepl.org.